Good evening. This is part 2 of the Causes of the Civil War recap set up for Ms. Persinger's U.S. History class. So what we have is we're in 1859. We're nearing on to the beginning of the Civil War. We have come back around to John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Now, we previously talked about John Brown when he attacked and killed several people in Kansas during the Bleeding Kansas event. Well, John Brown and his sons are forced to leave Kansas, which they do. They travel east. Specifically, what Brown and his supporters intend to do is they intend to attack a small federal armory, a place where guns are stored in the town of Harper's Ferry in Virginia. Their goal is to give these guns out to enslaved Africans and lead a slave revolt. Their overall goal is to end slavery throughout the entirety of the South by having slaves violently end their slavery. Now, in attempting to do this, Brown and his allies are stopped, specifically a gentleman named Colonel Robert E. Lee, who will later be the head of the Southern armies during the Civil War, and his soldiers surround and stop John Brown. Now, Brown is wounded. His sons, as well as the other men in his group, are killed, but Brown is wounded and he is arrested. Now, during this time, or after Brown is arrested, he is put on trial for both treason and murder. Now, Brown does not genuinely defend himself during this trial. He, in fact, his only defense is that the Bible instructs to clothe the naked, feed the hungry, and protect the weak, which is what his overall goal was in ending slavery. Now, specifically, he says, "If it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, I say let it be done." Now, as you've seen in all these pictures of John Brown, he is a man who has a look in his eye of somebody who is completely committed and believes very strongly in what he is doing. Well, his trial goes very quickly, and he is taken to the hangman's noose and hanged on December 2nd, 1859. Now, this alone would cause tension between the North and the South because we have a Northern abolitionist trying to lead a slave revolt, but it is complicated by the fact that Northerners were in fact angered over the death of John Brown. Church bells ring out in the North, honoring his death in the North. Many Northerners consider him to be a hero trying to end slavery. Now, as you could guess, the Southerners are going to take this very poorly. Specifically, Southerners are upset because the North is praising someone they would consider a terrorist by today's standards. This man was trying to arm people to kill them and their families, and so Southerners are in fact infuriated. Take this as only as another sign that the North is against them and trying to destroy slavery, which is so much a part of their way of life. So this sets the stage for the final phase of the causes of the Civil War, the election of Abraham Lincoln. Now, we spoke about Lincoln earlier. He ran for Senate against Stephen Douglas. Interestingly enough, the two men had actually dated the same woman. The woman who became Mary Todd Lincoln was in fact actually courted by Stephen Douglas as well. And so these two men, not only having run against each other, hating each other pretty significantly, both politically and personally. Now, tension is built up in this country in 1860, and everyone knows something big is coming. Lincoln has joined the Republican Party. Their stated goal is to stop the expansion of slavery. Lincoln receives the Republican Party's nomination for president. Now, the Democrats, the other major party in power in the 1860s and even through to today, makes a false step. The Northern Democrats nominate Stephen Douglas. Southern Democrats want to nominate somebody who is firmly in support of slavery, whereas Stephen Douglas said he supported popular sovereignty. The Southern nomination to John Breckinridge is a man who firmly supports slavery. The problem is the Democrats have now split their vote, and so with roughly half the country being Republican and roughly half the country being Democratic, only a quarter of the entire country's votes are going to go to each of the Democratic nominees. This is made even worse by the fact a fourth person, another Southerner, enters the race on the Constitutional Union Party, which is intended to keep the country together and keep slavery. So if you look at this political cartoon, you can see that they are tearing the country to pieces. Well, as you can see in the final vote, the vote is split four ways. no person gains a clear majority. In fact, Lincoln has the largest percentage of the vote, but he only receives 40% of the popular vote. Not even half the country voted for him. But he does receive enough electoral votes. And so, when he becomes president, many people in the South feel, A, that the election was in some way unfair, and B, that the country is now being run by someone who has stated very clearly he does not support their way of life. As a result, South Carolina is the first state to secede. They leave the Union on December 20th, 1860, before Lincoln can even become president, before he is even inaugurated and sworn in. The southern states begin seceding. Now, you could say that it was perhaps Lincoln, but it's more likely that really the South would have seceded had anybody who did not firmly support slavery had been elected. So much tension had been building up. If you look at your thermometer, you filled in your notes, so much tension had already built up that unless the South felt that somebody who had firmly supported their way of life were elected, they were likely to secede. So Lincoln becomes president on March 4th, 1861, and by that time 7 states have already seceded. They have already left the Union. They've created their own country, the Confederate States of America. They've written their own constitution, and they have elected their own president, Jefferson Davis. And so this leads us to the final event, the beginning of the war, 1861, the attack on Fort Sumter. And so when the southern states seceded, they created their own government. But in doing that, they also took control of all federal buildings in these southern states. And those could be forts, those could be lighthouses, those could be post offices, those could be government buildings. Well, Fort Sumter was a small federal fort, and it's located on a tiny little island in the harbor outside Charleston, South Carolina. Originally, it was intended to defend the port from pirates, but in this case, it is now filled with Union soldiers who are now in a state that considers themselves another country, the Confederate States of America, not the United States. So the commander refuses to turn over control of this fort to the Confederate States of America. Now, initially, the Confederacy decides to starve them out. They're simply going to wait them out until they run out of food, run out of whatever it is they need, and then they will leave. Now, Lincoln wanted to send troops, but he was afraid that by doing that, he would simply make the South do something violent, and then it would only make things worse. Lincoln's still hoping to try and reconcile the two. Well, on April 12th, when Lincoln is intending to send food via supply ships, on April 12, 1861, the Confederate government decides to take the fort by force. They begin firing. Now, if you look at the picture there, you can see those inside Fort Sumter were not having a very good day. It's a 34-hour battle. A total of about 5,000 cannonballs are fired. The walls of Fort Sumter are largely reduced to rubble. Fort Sumter surrenders after every major building in Fort Sumter is either destroyed or on fire. Now, oddly enough, the fighting results in no deaths. The first battle of the Civil War is bloodless. But as a result of Fort Sumter, we see the taking of sides. And what happens is 7 states had originally seceded, South Carolina first, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. After the Battle of Fort Sumter, another 4 states secede, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, and the war has officially begun. Thank you very much. Please check over, make sure your notes are complete onto your thermometer, and we will speak tomorrow in class. Thank you.